Afternoon, intuitives. As you can see, my headset finally came, so hopefully this will negate any audio problems. And it was also, something that was eventually necessary for me to do in the next couple days with my upcoming interview with John Atack, author of A Piece of Blue Sky. I wanted to do a short video today from a comment I got by someone named Raz, and the comment pointed out something I found very interesting and thoughts I've had over the years but never really fully put together about two different types of narcissism, that a person, especially INFJs and ENFJs, face in our lifetime. And the one is familiar to us, and that's growing up in a toxic family, having a parent or a relative of some sort being a narcissist, and the lasting effects of that toxic environment. But that being said, the other one is one that's not discussed, at least not much, and that's more on has to do with the effects of being in a relationship with a narcissist, and how society, in order to fit in with the censors, us intuitives kind of push us towards that at least some part in our life. Now, I've noticed a pattern among, the INFJs and ENFJs that I've known, or, at least been acquainted with or even observed. And we seem to have, a pattern when it comes to relationships. As I stated before, both of us, both types, INFJs and ENFJs, are not likely at all to be ones, in the hookup culture, having one night stands or even casual relationships. Because of our all or nothing syndrome, we don't know how to love halfway. And usually, at least, by our mid-20s, we kind of have a really good idea of what we're looking for, and we won't settle for less, and we're not the type to be with somebody just for the sake of being with somebody. Now, that being said, the pattern that I've noticed amongst us in terms of relationships is the first being, obviously, your quote first love. Usually you meet, late teens, early 20s. This would be the person that we would tend to be with through the majority of like your college years, and usually it would last into the first year out, and some even before we got together in high school. But that being said, that was the perfect one for that stage of your life, because let's be honest, high school and college is not the real world. You're amongst mostly people your own age, and you don't have most of the stresses of real life in terms of bills and full-time work, not counting summer jobs, of course. And you know what I mean, you're partying more. It's an important stage of life, but it's not quote the real world. And you and your partner then may have been perfect for each other for that stage of life, but as you get out of that environment and you enter the real world, people move for jobs. People's ambition becomes real important. As INFJs and ENFJs, a lot of times our identity is highly tied to our profession, or our profession that we're chasing. And as I've said before, and it's not for the sake of money, we're not materialists, but either it's usually either a creative field, some form of art or performance, or helping people in some way. Like me with, being in the fire service, or having been in the fire service. And, my full story with that is it's like a soap opera, and we'll get to it one day. A big part of at least my recent events, like I said, will be with John Atack on Wednesday. The second partner in this pattern is really the crux of this video, and it usually happens in your mid-20s. And I have no other way of saying it, but usually as INFJs and ENFJs, around your mid-20s, you have what you look back on now, or at least I do in my 30s and others I know, is the what the fuck was I thinking relationship. In my case, it was a girl 4 years younger than me. I was 25, she was 21. Physically, she was everything I look for, petite, uh, big, gorgeous blue eyes, full lips, that whole thing. But personality-wise, man, I was ignoring some red flags, in part probably because, I hadn't been in a relationship in almost 2 years, and I was working as an assistant golf course superintendent at the time, And I think I've mentioned before, stay away from golf course maintenance, but I bring it up just to mention that, I was chronically sleep deprived, sleeping like 3 to 5 hours a day, working 7 days a week, over 60 hours a week. So my senses were dulled. You know how that goes. Your intuitive senses aren't on your game if you're out of it and chronically sleep deprived or stuck in an ITI loop. And that seems to be fairly common with male INFJs and ENFJs. You get involved with somebody that you think you can help. Like, I saw potential in this girl. She had a horrible upbringing, but she wanted to help people. I convinced her to get back in the nursing school, and you really think you're helping that person turn the corner, like you're the first healthy relationship that they had, and you ignore red flags and you try to help them because that's in our nature as INFJs and ENFJs. ENFJ women especially, and I would say some INFJ women too, their what the fuck was I thinking relationship in their mid-20s is usually an older guy. And when I mean older, I mean like, a decade to a decade and a half, usually someone who was never married. And they're thinking, oh, most of the guys my age, the sensors anyway, they're just looking for something casual or, just to hook up. This guy's had his fun. He's at the age where he's, you would think he'd be ready to settle down. But no, the type that, they usually fall for is the player, the bullshitter, the narcissist, usually ENTP types more often than not, who, they're very, very confident in themselves. I mean, smug too, from what I've seen, but they're very confident, and that's attractive to INFJs and ENFJs because until our late 20s or thereabouts, we don't have that much self-confidence. A lot of us, when we begin our careers after university, we tend to be intelligent, very driven workaholics, but even when we get to, like promoted, get to where we want to be, or at least the beginnings of, we tend to have imposter syndrome. So that holds us back. Like, we think we don't deserve anything, especially those of us that have dealt with narcissistic abuse. It makes, that always gets in your head. The aftermath of narcissistic abuse makes you always second guess yourself. And for us intuitives, that's already hardwired into us to overthink. So INFJ is a little more because we have the added problem of introversion, and we're less likely than ENFJs to put ourselves out there and make the first move. And society plays a part in this too. Society basically says you have to be partnered up. So that's what happens, by your late 20s, especially, in my case, it depends on your family too, but especially if your mother's Italian or Jewish, she's going to be starting to push you to why you haven't found the nice girl and when are you going to settle down and all that. And that can lead to, choosing someone who's not right for you just for the sake of being in a relationship to satisfy societal norms. Society, like I said, says you shouldn't be single for too long, and it's better to be single if there's no one around that you would want to be with, like in a healthy relationship, the type of relationship that you're looking for. And more so with women, society pushing them to settle, to find a guy younger, like by 30, telling them they're gonna, quote, hit the wall, and that no man's gonna be interested in them, basically saying that when your youthful beauty starts to fade, nobody, no decent guys are gonna want you. And that's, I mean, even as a male, I find that insulting, especially as a guy who searches for that deep, soulful connection over looks. I've said it before on this channel. Like, I would take a girl that has integrity, intelligence, a good sense of humor, who's a 7 out of 10 over a 10 out of 10 who's just a materialist and is only impressed by throwing money around and doesn't tend to have deep thoughts or be able to have a deep conversation, isn't in tune with their emotions. So in that sense, that pushes a lot of INFJ and ENFJ women to settle for, a guy who's probably a censor, who is only interested in her for her looks. And especially the older ones, they'll work a game basically telling them that they're ready to settle down when in fact they only intend to use them for a short-term relationship. And that's just, I'll say it now for advice on anybody. if you intend to get into a short-term relationship with somebody, something casual that isn't going to last, I don't understand it, but at least you should be open and honest with that person before anything happens, to let them know, that you're not in it for the long haul. Again, that's just integrity. There really isn't much reason you know, to mention that, because I'm assuming most of my audience is intuitives, and that's just not us. It's more so for anybody listening who is trying to better understand INFJs and or ENFJs, because they're interested in one and want to find out how they can relate to it. And as this post mentioned, one of the biggest factors that leads to narcissistic relationships is conservative religion, like fundamentalist versions of religion that basically, they're narcissistic in their own nature, basically telling women that they're the property of their husbands, they must obey their husbands, and basically just let him do whatever he wants to her and bear children and take care of him. And that, some dusty book from the Bronze Age, I don't care which one it is, it's just out of date and wrong. I mean, yeah, sure, I'm not saying that there may be parables and lessons from it that are useful today. I'm talking about literal interpretations. It's time to think outside the box and wonder. Something I've always wondered with people that were, very religious on the fundamentalist end. It's like, well, how convenient is it, and this is kind of a narcissistic trait. How convenient is it that you were born into the one true religion? And, I'm talking like denominations too. So, let's, for the sake of argument, say that Christians are right. Well, who? The Catholics, the Baptists, the Anglicans, the Eastern Orthodox? You see where I'm going? It's like, how can somebody, especially if they've only ever studied the religion they were born into, just know that that's correct? That yeah, we got it right, we interpret this right, and, because I'm using Christianity because it's the most common and most, one that people would be familiar with to make my point. And I'm not trying to, if you're a Christian, I'm not denigrating your beliefs. I'm trying to say, you believe what you believe because it makes sense to you, not because you were told by your elders that this is the right one. I mean, I would encourage anybody to read about other faiths and make their own decision which one makes sense to them, because you're your own person. Narcissists think you're just a reflection of them, and you have to live their lives according to how they want. And that would include your religion as well. Believe whatever you want to believe, and I'm saying don't do things simply for tradition's sake. Do it if, believe in something if it makes sense to you, not what it did to somebody a few generations older than you. And like I said, they try to keep, marrying these women off young, by like their early 20s, before they can basically experience life, because the fundamentalist religions, they basically want girls married off by the time they're out of high school. So that way the girl's only reality would be basically being her father's property and then becoming her husband's property, and not coming into her own and understanding, herself. Because as INFJs and ENFJs, I've mentioned, we're not sure of ourselves usually till about our late 20s from what I've seen, but we know deep down what we want. Like, we know most of who we are. We just don't know how to assert that. We don't know how to express ourselves as our true selves, if that makes any sense. And that's real important. This post mentioned, the optimum age to start a family would be your early 30s. And, in this day and age, I 100% agree with that. I mean, you meet someone in your later 20s when your career is semi-established, and you take some time to get to know someone, decide to marry, start a family in your early 30s, because you could be financially secure by then. I mean, the baby boomers have made it very, very tough on us, and Gen X too, to being, financially secure. I mean, that's a separate topic in its own, but I bring it up to say, when a narcissistic baby boomer tells you, why don't you have this, this, this in this age when I did? Well, it's not 1983 anymore. The economy has completely changed, and the rules have been rigged against, the lower classes. Anything below the upper middle class, the game's just been rigged. And even, in politics, that's something that the populist right and the populist left agree on for different reasons. There's some overlap. We're pretty much in agreement about the military-industrial complex, but it's just a simple fact that the opportunity that the baby boomers had was simply a lot greater than ours. I mean, I'm just to give a brief example. College, I paid triple what my father paid to go to the same state university in inflation-adjusted dollars. And in 1979, in Pennsylvania, where I grew up, a third of the labor force was unionized. Now it's 6%. So, and there's a lot less public sector jobs as well. Because, Slick Willie said, the era of big government is over. All right. Yeah. So, we have that. But to my point, don't do something just for tradition's sake. And if you think your family or society in general is pushing you to settle with somebody toxic just because, quote unquote, it's time to settle down, that's not going to end well. That's going to lead to, eventually, if you get married too young to someone you don't want to be married to, eventually you're going to reach that age where you start to assert yourself, and it's going to bubble up, and you're going to want to get out because you want to be the person you want to be and not the person that your partner, feels is their property and is controlling them. So, the main point is trust your intuition. That's really the biggest piece of advice, I'm going to say on any of my videos is when you have that intuitive thought that something doesn't feel quite right, you have to listen to it, especially when you get the panic response from it. Like if your intuition's screaming at you, like, hey, don't do this, this is not who you are, this is going to haunt you. You can't ignore it and say, oh, everything will be okay, or, especially in the case of an ENFJ, be more worried about being a people pleaser, because you guys are really people pleasers, but you have to notice when somebody's trying to take advantage of you or exploit you, and know that, they're not trying to get you to push you to do this to overcome a fear of something or to get you to your end game. They're doing it to exploit you, either for monetary gain or just the simple fact that narcissists love exploiting people, and they get off on people feeling humiliated and degraded and going against their morals and integrity. So that point, again, trust your intuition. Panic response can be a lot of different things. A really common one is crying. Some people have like actual panic attacks. Mine is dry heaving. When I get that, my intuition's screaming at me to stop and think and to not go through with something that deep down I know I don't want to do, and to listen to what it's trying to say. Trust in your friends that you do trust. It's always important to have a good support network. People who you can open up and be yourselves around. INFJs, people you don't have to try to chameleon yourself around, which, find some ENFJs. They're awesome and they get us. I can't say that enough. I love you, ENFJs. So, my point, before I wrap this up again, is always trust your intuition. It's usually right. I've read about 85% of the time. Don't let the results of a narcissistic relationship make permanent changes to you. In other words, like if you end up in a relationship with someone that you didn't feel was right even from the beginning, and like I said, as INFJs and ENFJs, we take intimacy very seriously. Don't stay with somebody too long just because you were sleeping with him. That's just going to lead to that person getting more and more in your head, to them getting more and more controlling, to trying to take your free will, to try to break you down as narcissists do, to mold you into the person, they want to be, usually into their like little trophy wife. But once you get out of those relationships, you'll know never to ignore the red flags again. And to not even, engage with people like that as much as you can. Don't even give them the time of day, and don't dare for a second think, "Oh, this is all I deserve." That's one of the worst outcomes of being in narcissistic relationships with, romantic partners. Is after it, you'll be like, "Wow, this is who this person really is, and this is who the type that seems to be attracted to me. This must be all I deserve. No, just better understand yourself, better understand what narcissistic abuse is, and hope that your twin flame or another intuitive is right around the corner. Don't settle for less. You deserve it, and don't do things for tradition's sake. Thanks guys for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with another video or two, and I really hope that you'll watch John Atack interviewing me when it's posted either later on Wednesday or Thursday.